diving back into our Metabolical book. We're going to talk about fiber in food. So fiber in food is perhaps the most important nutrient for health because it single-handedly protects the liver and feeds the gut in 6 different ways. Both kinds of fiber together form a gel on the inside of the duodenum to reduce the rate of absorption of monosaccharides and disaccharides, as well as slow the breakdown of starches. Reduced absorption means reduced transport to the liver, thus preventing the liver from turning excess energy into fat, in turn preventing liver insulin resistance. The reduction in the rate of absorption also reduces the glycemic exertion in the blood, keeping the insulin response down and reducing energy deposition into fat tissue. The fiber transits the food through the intestine faster, generating the satiety signal sooner, so your full signal, thus reducing second portions. Soluble fiber is one of our fibers. It's metabolized by gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. They uniquely feed the microbiome of the colon, the large intestine, and are absorbed into the bloodstream where they are anti-inflammatory as well as suppress insulin secretion from the pancreas. Insoluble fiber, our other type of fiber, acts as a mild abrasive in the lumen of the colon, which dislodges and sloughs old dead cells, thus reducing cancer risk. There are 3 inherent myths about carbohydrates that play a role as to whether they're causative of or preventative against disease. First one we're going to talk about is sugar versus starch. So sugars are mono and disaccharides, so they're 1 or 2 molecules, while starch is a complex polymer, which means there's a lot of molecules and they're all kind of all over the place. Sugars either have 1 bond or no bonds to break, so they're digested and absorbed quickly in the duodenum, especially when they've been liberated from a food matrix, as they often are. Think about soda and fruit juice, alcohol. Starch has more bonds to break and is digested and absorbed slower. All of this adds up to a more rapid and higher insulin response with sugar, which drives weight gain. The type of starch, so there's 2, we call them 2 AMIs. A starch is not a starch, right? So there are 2 kinds of starch. There's amylose, which is your brown foods like beans, lentils, legumes, carbs that are digested and absorbed slowly. And then you have amylopectin. These are your white foods, so like wheat, pasta, rice, potatoes, carbs that are digested and absorbed more rapidly. Real food is glucose plus protein plus fat plus fiber. So those other macronutrients or lack thereof influence the glucose's absorption in the intestine, the insulin response that follows, and the risk for weight gain. The important parameter is glycemic load. So we've talked about glycemic index. Glycemic load is different from that because it takes into account the beneficial effect of fiber. A really good example of this is actually going to be carrots. They're high GI, so they have a lot of carbohydrate, but low GL. So GI, glycemic index, GL, glycemic load, because there's even more fiber in it. More fiber means a larger portion because there's less digestible carbohydrate. You can turn any high GI food into a low GL food by eating it with its original fiber. So again, the fruit versus the fruit juice. Real food is by definition low GL. Eat your fruits and veggies, your whole grains. Protein. It's your next one. Your kidneys have a limited capacity to excrete the metabolic byproducts of protein metabolism, and overexcretion can cause kidney damage. Therefore, protein quality is more important than protein quantity. So you want to get the good, high quality stuff. Because if you're not, as you probably read or have seen, a lot of like our red meat and our chicken is stuffed, like they make it fuller by filling in, like they use fillers such as like water. They use fillers like vegetable broth, but they don't actually say those things on the packaging. A lot of our meat has red dye in it to keep it red. So if you notice that your meat looks really, really red, that one's probably got red dye in it. You do want to see, it should start to turn brown if it's out in the air. That's why I get mine from Whole Foods, from the butcher there. Again, I can't afford to go to my local butcher or to like Primal because it's a little too expensive for me. But you can see if it's out in a case and it oxidizes, it'll kind of start to turn brown. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that there's nothing in it, like no fillers or no dyes and things like that. So you want to look for that. Fats. Omega-3s might just be the healthiest thing you could put in your mouth. So there are 2 kinds. There's DHA and EPA. DHA and EPA. both of which reduce the inflammatory response in the fat cell and prevent the release of free fatty acids. These are going to be like your fish oil supplements, your algae DHA, for those vegetarians or for those that don't do fish. Super, super good for you. This keeps them from hitting the liver where they would be packaged into triglyceride. So we're going to talk about kind of what's in our processed foods because there's a lot. The ultra-processed food industry adds chemicals at various points. They may add it to the animal while it's maturing to prevent infection, or they may add it to the plant while it's growing to prevent infection and infestation. They may also add chemicals to the food during processing for flavor, color, texture, and or preservation. In any case, when they add it to the animal or plant or food, they add it to you as well. Many of these chemicals act directly on those 8 subcellular pathways to increase your burden of chronic disease. So one of the things that we see a lot on ingredient labels are natural flavors. Did you ever wonder what that meant, artificial or natural flavors? Aside from salt, sugar, and water, natural or artificial flavor is the most commonly listed item, appearing on 1 out of 7 food ingredients list on the nutrition facts label. But what are they? They're chemicals. That's what they are. They're chemicals. And the company doesn't have to tell you what's in it. They just have to say natural flavor. That could mean 100, 1,000 different things. Because they don't have to tell you because the FDA doesn't require them to. Since most flavors are non-polar, it usually means there's an emulsifier, a solvent, and a preservative, although it could be several of 100 different items, like I said. The companies that make flavors also make fragrances. So if you ever see fragrance, like it's like, oh, you got like a perfume and it's like vanilla, but nowhere on the ingredients list does it say vanilla. It just says flavor or it says fragrance, same exact thing. Where is that vanilla coming from? No one knows. No one knows. The companies do, but they don't have to disclose that information. In general, the dose is small though, so disease is unlikely unless you have an allergy. But we don't know for sure. It's been coming out more and more often that things that say fragrance in them are really bad for our hormones. So if these people are also making flavors, it's probably also not great for our hormones either. I like to stay on the safer side and just eat whole real foods. Emulsifiers. So these are the things that kind of help keep everything together in food. So like if you get chocolate, you may see lecithin on the back. You don't want that. It doesn't need it. Then you have polysorbate 80. That's in shortening. Carbozymethylcellulose is in salad dressing. And carrageenan is in ice cream. And they're all added to foods to maintain food consistency upon storage. These molecules have one polar end and another non-polar end, so they're able to bind to a fat molecule and a water molecule to keep them from separating. So emulsifiers are also detergents, and they can strip away the mucin layer that sits on top and protects the intestinal epithelial cells from the bacteria, thus predisposing individuals to intestinal disease, food allergy, or leaky gut. Thus far, however, the FDA states they haven't found a cause for human concern. Again, FDA is a government thing, governmental things. It's the government. Trust what you want to trust. Take it with a grain of salt. But that is food and fiber, and also just a little bit on kind of what they're putting into our food. Next week, we'll go a little bit more in depth into that, I believe, about what's really in our food. But if you have any questions on part 4 of Metabolical, feel free to leave a comment below.